Our special investigation into the abduction of two teenage girls 17 years ago. Vanessa Conlon and Jessica Small were only 15. The scene, the main street of Bathurst, west of Sydney. Both girls were taken in the middle of the night. Vanessa would escape, but Jessica hasn't been seen since. For years, local police did little about the girls' abduction and Jessica's suspected murder. But nearly 2 decades on, this cold case is finally cracking.
Hello, darling. How are you?
This is a reunion Vanessa Conlon has waited 17 years for. Her bond with Faye Connors is one born out of sheer terror.
And I did believe you, darling. I did believe that there was something very bad happened.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Oh,
It's very good.
I just wanted to say thank you so much.
The last time these two women saw each other, Vanessa was a terrified teenager, banging on Faye's front door in the middle of the night.
If you didn't let me in that night, I probably wouldn't be here. Thank you so much.
That's all right. Just wish
Just
I could have done something else.
It's the night Vanessa will never forget. She and her best friend Jessica Small, both only 15, were abducted from the main street of Bathurst. While Vanessa eventually escaped, Jessica didn't. She's never been seen since. What haunts you the most about that night?
If I'm honest, the fact that she was taken and I wasn't. That's the thing that's the hardest to live with.
Growing up in Bathurst, a small country town in the shadow of the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, Jessica Small was a cheeky, freckle-faced teenager.
She loved kids and animals, and she loved us. So she was just a normal, happy, healthy young girl with a lot of dreams.
For almost 2 decades, Jessica's mother, Ricky Small, has agonised over what happened to her daughter.
All I can say, honestly, Allison, is that I hope things were over for her quickly. If I may say it like that. But I can't think I could. My head's entertained the ideas of her being locked up for days or held for days or tortured, or I hate to go there.
It's a pretty dark place,
It
isn't
is. It's a very dark place.
It's October 25, 1997, and best friends Jessica and Vanessa are enjoying a night out at the local amusement parlour. They leave around midnight.
There was a man asking about Jessica that night. One of the employees that used to work there has actually come forward. Believe it or not, he actually told this to the police the next day. And it turns out that this man was asking about Jess, saying things to the effect of, she looks like she's up for a good time. So the car came along here. He was driving really quite slowly. He turned and looked at us, did a U-turn, came down here and pulled up just down here.
And you made a split-second decision to get in that car.
Yeah, and it's a decision I've regretted for the rest of my life.
Hey, how's your night been?
Yeah.
How's your video games?
He said to me, oh, and your game's of pool.
Oh, how was your game of pool?
Yeah, good.
And then I put 2 and 2 together and I just said, oh yeah, good. And didn't really think anything of it at the time. He offered us a lift and we decided to get in.
But a few minutes into the car trip, the girls start getting nervous. They're on a quiet country road on the edge of town, and the driver is agitated.
I remember he was driving quite slowly, and that kind of, put a little bit of fear into me. And I remember looking into the side mirror trying to see Jess in the back seat because I was really starting to get quite worried. He'd been looking side to side and he reached and took his seatbelt off.
Is that the point when you realised you were in real trouble?
Yeah, and he had turned the car off, turned to look at Jessica, and he said to her, "Right, come here."
Right, come here.
I don't think so.
And I just looked at him and said, "No, I don't think so." And he actually put his hand around my throat quite firmly and pushed me right back into the seat, and he was choking me. It was at this stage that Jess went to get out of the car. I managed to open my door. He realised he couldn't grab a hold of Jess, so he grabbed a hold of my hair, and I had to rip my hair out of his hands to get out of the car. And we're both running towards the house with the light on, and just running and running and running. So we're both running and screaming, and I could hear her behind me and I could hear him behind me, and all I could think of was just get to the house with the light on.
Please, please, help me leave here, please.
I was woken up by somebody hammering on my door and singing out. She was just shaking, white, very, very scared. I thought she was so scared that she might have even been going to be sick.
It was Faye Connor's door that Vanessa banged on.
You have to help me find my friend.
Was she making any sense when you first opened the door?
Not really. It was very hard to understand because all she kept saying was, my friend, I need you to help me find my friend." And we didn't realise what had happened, so we didn't know where her friend was.
By this time, the car with Jess inside was gone. Faye rang police, but they showed an astonishing lack of interest. It would be the first of many police errors.
You'd like to think that if they had have believed her and got more cars out and more police out, that they would have been able to do a bit more.
So why do you think the police didn't believe you?
I think because Jess and I were, troubled teens, and we, been in a little bit of trouble. And
So some man has Jess doing God knows what to her, and you say the police weren't overly concerned.
not at all. Not even a little bit. They outright told me I was lying.
Coming up, Jess is missing.
I could tell something was really wrong. Really wrong.
But police do nothing. Now, the crucial witness.
It was like a fear, sort of like when she come past screaming.
And an incredible discovery.
It looked like something very suspicious.
That's next on 60 Minutes. Vanessa Conlon and her best friend Jessica Small were only 15 when they were abducted from the main street of Bathurst and driven out of town. Vanessa would escape. Jessica's never been seen since, and no one has ever been brought to justice. But all that may be about to change, thanks to crucial new evidence and a witness who saw it all happen.
The next minute, Vanessa came in my back kitchen door and just flung at me. Flung her arms around my neck and just wailed, which I could tell by her cry something was really wrong. really wrong. Sorry.
On the outskirts of Bathurst, Ricky Small's daughter Jessica is fighting for her life.
It was like a fear, sort of like when she come past screaming, you could hear the screaming coming, the fear in someone.
Rob Fitzpatrick lived on the edge of town. In the early hours of Sunday morning, he'd just returned home from his cousin's wedding.
When the car come past, I seen the white car, but
Rob crept along his fence line out of sight and got to within 15 or 20 metres of the car. It was a white Holden Commodore.
so
Could you still hear the screams at this point?
no, the screaming had stopped. I watched him get out of the car and walk around to his boot and get something out of his boot. He's kneeling on the seat and reached over the back and he was doing something in the seat. And as I'm watching, he just drove off casual. He weren't even on the parked off the road. He just drove up straight up the hill.
And what's beyond that?
Darkness. There's not much out there. If anyone, you could scream as much as you want, no one will hear you out there. You could say we're the last road out of town.
When Rob heard that Jessica Small was missing, he went straight to the police. But incredibly, they weren't interested in what he had seen. He persisted and went back the following day. And this time, they reluctantly took his statement. Just one paragraph.
But the whole time, I got the feeling like he didn't want to take the statement. Like he's already made up his mind what was going on.
Do you think they didn't care because Jessica was known to them? She was a girl from the wrong side of the tracks?
Yes, I'd say that. My feeling is if her family was more important in the town, it would have been a whole different investigation.
You know, that they were crucial moments, that first day or two, to me. We have to get to her. We have to find her. Please help me. We've got to find her. And you don't know where to look, where to go. And I'm just praying, I guess at that point, that I had some smart policemen on the job because I had nothing else.
Did you think in those first few days that she was alive?
I think I tried to imagine that she would be strong enough to get away from a situation, but obviously she wasn't.
Eight months after Jessica vanished, two forestry workers stumbled across a set of girls' underwear, a bottle of bleach and a blanket covered in blood. They'd been dumped in bushland about 75 kilometres east of Bathurst. This isolated forest possibly held the most important clue to identifying Jessica's killer. So something pretty horrific had happened.
It looked like it, or something very suspicious. That's the first thing that crossed our mind.
No one knows this forest better than Glenn Christie Johnston. He's been working here for 30 years.
Automatically the first thought was of Jessica, because it was around that time.
Was that spot easily visible to anyone passing by?
No, it was in an isolated area. That road had been down a track that nobody'd usually use, so it was fairly isolated.
So do you think whoever hid those items must have had some knowledge of the forest?
Yes, they should have, or knowledge of how the forest worked anyway.
True to form, Bathurst police all but dismissed Glenn too. They didn't even bother to take his statement. And that potential evidence he found wasn't DNA tested. And what's even more shocking, it was later destroyed by the local police. All the while, Jessica's mother, Ricky Small, is told nothing.
The fact that it was the following year just blows me away. I would have been in that forest, scratching the dirt, looking for her, physically.
Do you feel let down by the police?
Very. I'm disgusted. And I'm hurt and I'm angry. And the treatment by police, Bathurst police, like the local detectives that were on the case, was just wrong. It was abominable.
Coming up, the case goes cold. Until one dogged detective...
It's just so obvious that she's telling the truth.
...zeroes in. Did you kill Jessica Small? That's next on 60 Minutes. When Jessica Small and her best friend Vanessa Conlon were abducted in October 1997, they were just 15 years old. But they already had reputations as tearaways. Vanessa managed to escape from their attacker, but Jessica's never been seen since that terrible night. For years, local police swung between indifference and incompetence, coloured by the girls' wild reputations. But finally, one dogged detective has narrowed the hunt. Bathurst is a 3-hour drive west of Sydney. It's where Vanessa Conlon grew up. But this place will always be haunted by the disappearance of her best friend, Jessica Small. For 10 years, police showed little interest in the case. Then, Detective Sergeant Peter Smith from the New South Wales Homicide Squad knocked on her door.
He actually said the words to me, "I believe you." It was like the weight of the world had just been lifted, and I finally had this light that we might get somewhere.
It doesn't make sense that this girl would run screaming and obviously terrified to a person's house in the middle of the night, and then to have people not believe her, it just doesn't make sense. Given especially now, 16, 17 years have passed and she's maintained the same story and it's corroborated over and over and over again. It's just so obvious that she's telling the truth.
Detective Smith inherited a mess, incomplete files and a lack of any real detective work. But one witness who'd been previously ignored by local police stood out to him. An employee at the amusement parlour where the girls had played pool that night. That employee had a strange conversation with a man who matched the description Vanessa gave of her attacker.
That a adult male, had been in the amusement centre asking about Jessica and actually pointed her out and said, she looks like she's up for a good time, who is that? And then during that conversation he made mention that he was an employee of the Oberon timber mill.
And it was at that point that you realised you had a pretty solid lead.
It was amazing. I just couldn't believe that no one had asked him about that before. It's just so important.
In 2011, Peter and his team began interviewing 400 men who had worked at the Oberon timber mill in October 1997. Their investigations took them all over Australia and to the UK. They eventually narrowed the list down to just 2 men, Andrew McBride and Craig Robertson. Both were named as persons of interest in this month's inquest into Jessica's suspected murder.
There's more information or evidence to suggest that Andrew McBride was involved.
And what is that information?
That McBride had access to a white VK Holden Commodore with holes in the passenger footwell. The car that the girls get into on the night, Vanessa sits in the front seat. And as it's driving along, Vanessa notices there's holes in the front passenger footwell and that it's what she later describes as a white Holden Commodore. That's pretty explicit. It matches acutely Vanessa's description.
Andrew McBride, Allison Langdon from 60 Minutes. I was hoping to have a talk to you, please, about the disappearance of Jessica Small.
We are actually trying to have lunch, if you don't mind.
McBride worked at the Oberon timber mill for about 12 months, but the day Jessica vanished, he left town with no explanation. We now know that while he was here, he had a history of predatory behaviour towards teenage girls. In '97, the year of the kidnapping, he often gave alcohol and marijuana to 2 15-year-olds, whom he'd met through dating one of their mothers. He ended up having sex with one of those girls just after her 16th birthday. He was 37. Did you abduct Jessica and Vanessa that night?
I don't mind talking to you about it. I know nothing of this lady's disappearance. Absolutely nothing. No, nothing. I have no idea what happened to this young lady. The circumstances that surrounding it were only made known to me through the police investigation. But other than that, I know nothing.
Why do you think you are now a person of interest?
Excuse me, I'm not really sure. I'm just going through those motions now with my solicitor and through the court. I was in Sydney. I have bank deposits and bank statements that put me elsewhere. Yeah, so that was not me.
Yeah. So you did not kill Jessica Small?
No. No, I did not, ma'am.
McBride says he has an alibi, that bank records put him in Sydney the night Jessica disappeared.
That's not correct. Those bank records put him in Sydney on the 24th of October, which is a Friday. They don't put him anywhere on the Saturday or the Sunday.
So he could well have been in the Bathurst area that night?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's not enough to prove he was involved, and there's nothing to prove he wasn't involved.
Why did you leave town in such a hurry after Jessica disappeared? Your bank statement shows you're in Sydney on the Friday. Jessica disappeared on the Saturday.
To sit opposite him throughout the inquest and not know if it is him that took Jess, And then to hear all these horrible things that he has done before is so incredibly frustrating.
Did you recognise him?
To sit here now and say that 100% it's him, I can't do that. And that breaks my heart as well.
The horror of that October night has destroyed many lives in the small country town of Bathurst. Vanessa still blames herself for not turning back. While Rob Fitzpatrick has wrestled with the idea that he may have witnessed the last few minutes of Jessica's life.
Do you think you could have saved her?
Yes. I think that makes it harder. You know what I mean? It could have stopped out the front of my house. If I'd known what I know today, it would have stopped that in front of my house. I think that's one of the hardest things I got to live with. Why didn't I do more?
It haunts you, doesn't it?
Yep. I hate it.
For Jessica's mother, Ricky, there's still hope that one day she will get to say goodbye to her daughter and give her the dignity of a proper burial.
We haven't found her, 17 years, and we haven't found her.
Do you think you ever will?
I would like to hope I could. I think coming from a mother's heart, you always want to bring your child home, your baby home.
You deserve that.
I think I do. I think I do.
Hello, I'm Allison Langdon. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.